we're going to get started. So I'm just going to quickly introduce myself. My name is Chloe. I am the Director of Academic Success here at Nectar, and I'm super excited to moderate our Teaching with Nectar Instructor panel. So let's do a quick round of introductions on who is going to be in this panel. I'm going to pass it over to George.
Hello, my name is George Hanshaw, and I teach for the psychology department, and I am the director of digital learning solutions here at Los Angeles Pacific University. So I'm an adjunct professor for the psychology department and full-time for the digital learning solutions, where we are highly engaged with Nectar, all the wonderful people at Nectar, and the AI assistance that they provide.
I'll jump in. My name is Brant Himes. I'm a professor in humanities at Los Angeles Pacific University, and I've been integrating Nectar into my Bible and history courses. And we recently did a major revision of our U.S. history course, and we used a lot of AI tools that I'm excited to share more about.
Thanks, Brant. Shannon or Todd?
I'm happy to go. My name is Shannon Hunt. I am the lead faculty for the Applied Psychology program here at Los Angeles Pacific University. We have been using AI in some really cool ways that I'm excited to share with you guys today in our psychology program.
And I am Todd West. I teach in the English department at LAPU, and let's see, I'm excited to share what I do in the English program with Spark.
All right, awesome. So as you all can see, we have a stacked group with us today. So I'm super excited to dive into this discussion. For those who may not be familiar with what is Nectar, Nectar is AI infrastructure that is designed specifically for higher education. And so what essentially does is Nectar AI enabled educators to create these custom AI assistants that are trained on your course content and really designed to scale support for your students. And so for this discussion today, we're going to have all these faculty here share a lot more about what they've been doing, how they've been implementing Nectar, what's been going on, what challenges they've been facing, how are students reacting to it, all of that good stuff. And if you're interested in learning more about Nectar after this discussion, I'm going to encourage you to attend our session later this morning at 11 a.m. Kathy, our VP of Business Development, is actually going to do a Nectar AI demo where she's going to go through all of the product features, how to create those assistants, how you can set this up at your institution. So as we're going through this discussion, if you have any questions regarding to the product, I'm going to ask that you hold those questions during that session. We're going to focus this discussion on all things implementation. Now, before we dive into the actual discussion in itself, I wanted to just quickly highlight our LAPU case study. And I think this is really what blew up Nectar, is exactly what started here. So we developed Nectar AI back in 2024, and LAPU is one of the first schools that beta tested Nectar. And so we wanted to essentially evaluate the impact of these AI assistants. So we did a match pair study where we compared student outcomes from courses that had access to Nectar AI, specifically under literature and psychology, versus courses who did not have access historically to Nectar AI. And the results from one semester were amazing. We saw a 20% increase in GPA, a 13% increase in average final scores, a 36% increase in motivation, and 13% increase in self-efficacy. And these results really, I would say, like I said, put Nectar really on the map. These are results actually posted currently on an open praxis research paper, which I will drop into the chat if anyone here is interested in learning more. But really, this research has inspired a lot of the pilots that we've been doing with other customers all across the board to really evaluate, to understand the impact of these AI assistants. And I'm super excited to have the faculty here share a lot more about their experience in detail. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to switch over to our discussion here. So during this time, if you have any comments, feel free to drop it through the chat. I am going to leave some time at the very end for any questions from the audience, but we're going to get started with just kind of talking through how this implementation started. And I'm going to start with George here. So with all the AI tools that are currently out there, How did you choose Nectar AI? What made you choose it versus all of these other tools?
That's a great question because there were a couple others that we were actually testing together, kind of going head to head. And the big reason was, so you saw the results from the study. So we had access to the data scientists at Nectar. We had access to Kavita and Jordan, who are the founders, who know a lot about artificial intelligence. So it's a fantastic tool. But what made the difference for us was the people and how we were allowed and enabled to implement it because we have control over the prompt, each individual prompt and how it acts. So by giving that flexibility and that level of access is what just brought us right over to Nectar because none of the others gave us that level of interaction. Is that the right word for it? So just really how it works, how we're able to control it within our courses, because we didn't want it to be like Chat GPT, copy and paste, and we're done. We want it to actually help with learning. And we were able to do that. And the reason why we were able to do it so quickly is because the interactions with all the people at Nectar that helped us put them together so they worked well. So that's very cool. It's been a great whole process. And
Thanks,
Mike said he
George.
put it together in 6 weeks, from pilot to full implementation in 6 weeks. Him and Ryan Rufner were the main champions for that. It was very cool.
Yeah, very, very fast turnaround. Yes. Shout out to Mike and Ryan. Awesome. Brant, did you have any details you wanted to add here as well?
Yeah, I was able to pilot some of the features in our first courses when we were working with Nectar. So I was involved, yeah, in our courses where I was I was very curious to see how our students would react. The thing that really was exciting for me was because we were able to train Nectar on our course material specifically. Um, the responses and the learning that was happening and the dialogue that was happening with Spark, with our AI assistant, it was very consistent with how I would have interacted with students. It felt it had a genuineness to it that felt this captures still kind of the ethos of my course, of the university. And so it really kind of alleviated some of that wondering, where is this going to go out and just grab random things? But because we were able to control the data sets it was using and the information, the training material, it brought a lot of confidence, I would say, in how it was being used.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so now that we've, chosen Nectar, I think, and from the pilot, we started small, but the next question is how do we actually implement this across the campus? George, can you share a little bit more about how the implementation was and how we got this into every classroom?
Yeah, absolutely. And Steve, I want to answer Steve's question here about how do students encounter these resources at the same time. So we went from, it was a Bible course and a psychology course for the pilot. We had one course that had Nectar AI, one course that did not. Exact same course, different students, and we compared, right? It was very clear that they worked. So as soon as we found out that they were working, we said we need to implement this fully. If Dr. Herman's on here, he's the one that made the actual decision to do that, which was amazing. And when we started to employ this, it initially started just as a course assistant. So you could ask, hey, when is this assignment due? Can you help explain this? And that's how it started. We iterated through multiple prompts, and it initially has been only if you want to use it. So it's been optional, right? Nectar has been an option within the course. So Steve, no one was forced to use the AI assistant. It was optional. We noticed even in our longitudinal study now that people who do engage with Nectar get better grades. And that's awesome because it's Socratic in nature. It does not give people copy and paste sort of stuff. It actually engages them. So we'll chat about that later. But it's integrated within every course and it's optional. Now, we have now started integrating it into active learning. Shannon and the psychology team and Brant use it in history where they engage with it in discussions. So now it's not like ChatGPT talking to Claude in discussions for asynchronous courses anymore, right? It's different. Now we have it so there's active learning that happens. And the students have to engage with AI, with Nectar in that aspect. And Todd's used it in his English courses as well. So it's been kind of an amazing process. So it went from uh, AI assistant pilot to AI assistant in all courses, and now we're expanding into active learning. That was a long-winded explanation. Sorry.
No, that was awesome. It's really nice to see the whole flow of how the implementation goes. Because really, this is such a new, evolving technology, and so it makes sense that we're, starting in bite chunks as we continue to grow and see the possibilities of what AI can really do. Um, One thing that we've already been talking a lot about is the student experience. So, opening up this to all the faculty here, what has been the student engagement? What has been the student responses to your AI assistants, even specifically in your disciplines as well? And any faculty would like to start, feel free to do so.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I would say initially there was some hesitation and maybe even some skepticism. But as students started to engage there, and as a faculty member, I was pleasantly surprised with the deeper learning that I was seeing, the deeper reflection, because Spark, that's what we call our AI assistant, is trained in this Socratic method where there's always an additional question of application and learning and not just spitting out the answers. Students I've noticed, are surprised by kind of the train of thinking that continues to develop, and then they share those. And having taught these classes for a long time, you kind of get used to seeing the same answers over and over again throughout the semesters. And since we've introduced Spark, I see different strands of thought that I hadn't seen before, and that's been refreshing for me.
Awesome. Shannon?
I'm going to kind of answer this from the active learning aspect of how we are using AI and Nectar right now. So in our psychology program, we have started just initially, and we did a study on this too to see how effective it is. But we are using active AI to create characters that our students engage with and practice these soft skills of psychology. So they are learning how to engage with characters who are trained to represent different clients. Okay. For example, I might have a client who's experienced a crisis, and that character is trained. So students are learning how to interact in real time in a safe and ethically sound way with the character who is going to engage with them. And so it helps them to develop, again, those soft skills of psychology, such as, empathy and using reflection statements and I messages and using open-ended questions and incorporating instructor feedback with them. So I'll talk a little bit more about this later on, but what we're seeing from the study is that it really has very positive impacts, not only on GPA, but also students in terms of perceived belonging at the university and all kinds of things. So some really powerful and notable outcomes from this. But I think initially your question is, how are they responding to this? So this is a standalone assignment in one class that we started with. And they really had some very valuable qualitative feedback in terms of realistic responses from the AI characters, real time thinking on their feet, how to respond in these conversations, being able to develop clinical professional skills. And these are actual comments that students are providing for us on anonymous surveys associated with their experience. So some might have some hesitation just because it's AI driven, but once they practice, what we're seeing in the feedback is that, hey, this has really been beneficial to practice these clinical skills before I'm actually working with real people.
Thank you. And Todd?
Yeah, I'm a little bit jealous of the psychology program and the history program. In that, for the English program, when the students use Spark, use the AI, it's completely voluntary, and yay for autonomy and choosing if you're going to use it or not. But it's so helpful that I'm thinking that it would be very helpful if it was like worked into some of our assignments already, which it's not. It's completely voluntary. But for example, when my students are struggling, so they write a research paper about a controversy that's related to the workplace. Okay, but if they don't read that, or if they have trouble coming up with like a topic that they could write about, when I tried it out with the AI, it was great. I was able to talk with the AI. What do you know about this? What's a controversy? I don't even know what a controversy is. So, but I was able to talk with the AI in a back and forth way that I think students would find it very helpful. So now I wish they would use it more.
Well, thank you so much. I think what all three of you highlight were just like the very differences of how you can integrate AI into your classrooms. We saw heard three very different applications, and there's so much more possibilities outside of that. And that's really what the Nectar team here is designed to also help you do. We understand that there's so many possibilities with what AI can offer, and so we try really hard to work with our instructors to make sure that we've designed a solution that makes sense for them, because really these things are super powerful and can be placed in a lot of different ways in really creative and engaging ways. For example, the psychology example that Shannon shared, that's such a fun way to learn, is really how I see it. All right, so diving in a little bit more details around that, could you share some specific examples on how you've incorporated the AI assistant into your course activities or assignments?
Yeah, so we just did a major course revision in our U.S. history course from 1865 to the present, so post-Civil War to the present day. And there was a couple skills that really wanted to focus on and particularly help students engage with primary source material. That's an important skill in history. And then also to develop critical thinking and to be able to look at these issues from different avenues. Traditionally, I've done that through kind of the standard history analysis essay. And in the past few years, especially, that's become more and more of ChatGPT answers. And it's, as an instructor, it's frustrating to see that. And so we were looking at this opportunity to how can we create some AI resilient assignments where we can develop these skills of primary source development and critical thinking, maybe in a different way. So we developed in many of our discussion forums, we created a think, pair, share activity where students were they were given a kind of a repository of primary sources for that week based on our topic. They could go out and pull that primary source, and they were supposed to think about it first, read it and reflect on it. And then they paired up with Spark, who is trained on the history material, have a conversation with Spark about, I think they needed to do about 5 interactions back and forth to learn more about the primary source. And then they shared their learnings in the discussion forum. And that's created some really fantastic discussions, some much more nuanced and interesting. Oftentimes discussion forums, are a few questions and they end up kind of being the same answers repeated over and over. And with this assignment, students bringing in their learning, sharing the things that they're realizing, I'm seeing a lot more diversity of thought and questions that I wouldn't have, necessarily thought of to ask before that our students are bringing in. So that's one example that's been really interesting.
Awesome. Yeah. Shannon,
And
go ahead.
I mentioned earlier, I'm going to kind of stick with the active learning AI because you guys are covering Spark really well. And just to give you some ideas of how we're using this in psychology, and if you come later to one of the presentations at 9:30, I'm going to give you a demonstration so you can figure out how you can use that in your own organization and school too. But beyond the AI character, we have the AI character now in crisis counseling and intervention class, okay? But also we just revised our motivation class, which has students from multiple different programs. So we also incorporated AI characters in that class for students as an assignment. So this is not voluntary. They are going to be doing this. They're practicing motivational interviewing with an AI character that is trained based on 4 different fields. Business, so someone who is trying to consider maybe a new job path. We have health sciences, so someone who is struggling with quitting smoking. We have education, so a teacher who's trying to use motivational interviewing with a high school student who struggles with motivation in math class, don't we all? Sorry for all those math people out there, but also, a clinical conversation too, and as someone trying to manage their anger. So we're using these characters as, again, opportunities to practice these skills that they're going to be using in the field, in this case, motivational interviewing. In another class that I'm just in the midst of revising, our capstone classes. So for our capstone classes, some of our students are doing what's called a psychoeducation project. What we're going to have students do for this is to actually themselves train an AI bot on content for their topic and population. So let's say that a student chooses PTSD in the veteran population. So they're going to train the AI bot with all kinds of credible research on PTSD and veterans, okay? And so they're going to be submitting this, we're going to practice, but we're also going to be having students use those AI bots in discussion. So their colleagues are going to be asking questions to the AI bot that they trained based on that information. So students are using relevant skills that they're going to be using in the field. And we have to keep up with the AI technology, our students do, in order to develop professional competencies that they're going to use in the future. So we're trying to integrate things with AI assignments that they're going to be using now and in the future. So this is another creative way that we can use Nectar and AI within our course rooms.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on, along with the interviewing skills that you've done, we've trained in the history course historical figure bots, and we have a couple of assignments where students pick a historical figure, Martin Luther King Jr. or something, and that bot has been trained around Martin Luther King Jr.'s, persona and his primary source material, and then they have this interview and they learn more about that figure, and then they share out and kind of report on what they're learning. I really think these active learning pieces are what are some of the most exciting ways that we're finding to use Nectar.
And one thing, if somebody could, Todd, maybe you could expand on this, or Brant, is so we have the AI resiliency built in because they're engaging with it and we're asking them to. But you also ask them to write in their own voice as well. That
Yeah,
was kind of cool.
yeah, that's been an important thing. One of the things that we've struggled with, and I'm sure, Todd, I'd love to hear you a little bit on this as well, is with the kind of the proliferation of AI and ChatGPT, you start to notice things are sounding the same, and students become less confident in writing because they kind of pull it. And so we're really trying to lean into encouraging students to find and use their own voice. And that means, particularly in discussion forums, not, I recognize when there's grammar errors that's actually a student, and that's okay, for example. But even but even beyond that, helping students to engage with the technology and with these great resources, but then finding ways to equip them and empower them to use their own voice. That's going to be, I think, one of the really important lessons of moving forward with this technology.
Hmm. Brant, I would add to what you said there in the English classroom. A lot of the and I usually teach the research writing class, but it's they say, I say. How do I bring my voice into a research paper? And I'm finding all these great outside sources, and they all sound terrific. And so, where do I, as a student, come in? And one thing I like about the technology is it's always asking, well, what do you think? It's always at, well, what do you think? So it's really sort of empowering the student to not be passive, be
Mhm.
active, engage. And so this is a great thing in the writing classroom.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think you've all highlighted some few important points that I kind of want to reiterate. I think one thing I wanted to mention with what Shannon was talking about was these AI assistants have, well, while it's really amazing in teaching the content that you're teaching, it's also simultaneously preparing students for an AI world or AI career, because there's so much skills when it comes to interacting with these assistants, even creating assistants, creating the knowledge base that are essential skills that they're actually going to need when they step out of, the university and want to do whatever career they want to pursue in the future. So it's really great to have students be exposed to these skills now in their learning, so it doesn't become something else that they have to kind of take on in the future. And then one thing that I think everyone was noting was also the kind of the awareness of the challenges with using AI. We know that there's definitely harm when it comes to using AI if it's not being controlled or being monitored. And so the way that we've built Nectar is to give educators the full ability to customize how these AI assistants actually engage with your assistants. So you all have the ability to really harness the power of AI, but make sure those guardrails are there so that we're always encouraging critical thinking, active learning, and not the other things that we've heard, which is like doing the work for students or things like that. So since we've already talked about this, let's dive a little bit deeper into the challenges. What would you guys say were the challenges of implementing Nectar into your courses? And George, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. You know, getting students to use it voluntarily, because initially AI is still new in the higher education world, right? It's still new. It still has that new car smell to it, right? So some students are still hesitant to use it because we've received feedback sometimes that, well, it's against the policy when it's not against the policy. We actually embed it within the classroom, right? So it's just overcoming the communication barriers about it is the biggest thing that I see. So it's not really from the tech side, it's from the human side is where the barriers are from my perspective, because we have about I want to say a 38% usage rate when it's voluntary. And when students are getting significantly higher grades when they use Spark versus not, we would love to have 100% everybody getting better grades. So it's interesting how that is transpiring. So we really want people to use it and use it well, and just kind of overcoming that initial, how I guess a lot of higher ed was anti-AI. And let me say, if you're anti-AI, that's fine, but if you're trying to block it, you've already lost. So so you may as well embrace good tools that you have control over, like Nectar, and communicate the importance of using it and communicate how important it is to use it, because these are skills. AI is a skill set that they need.
I wanted just to kind of piggyback on what George was saying here. If you were to sit in our faculty meetings for a year prior to us actually launching this, you would have heard George bringing us data and statistics and research about the usability and the necessity of incorporating AI into our classrooms. And I think it does take a while for us to transition to a new way of thinking as educators in order to figure out how do we make the classroom the very best learning environment for our students. So we did have to talk about it and hear about it and slowly move into it for a while. But now we're here and we have full buy-in, and we see the amazing advantages of it for our students, for our classrooms, for the content, our curriculum. I mean, it's really great. But I just wanted to mention that, George, because I want to thank George for kind of gently and sometimes shoving us in the right direction. And we all are on board now. And it was really beneficial because now we see the great outcomes from it. But in terms of challenges, again, I'm just going to kind of stick on the area that I'm using it most with our students. I would say that it's really very important that we test our AI characters prior to putting it live in our classrooms. Okay, so we are training. When I say we, I mean our digital learning team. They are amazing. They are training. I might give them a profile or a case for the characters, and they build that. So I'm going to test that before I make it live with students. And then some of the things, like we're still kind of tweaking, okay, how do we make sure students can save the whole dialogue and submit it? And I think we figured out all the tweaks for that too, but I think we really have to practice with them. So when students have questions, we are knowledgeable about how to respond to those questions and encourage them and tell them the benefits and how this is useful for them. So I think the preliminary training and user making it user friendly for our students and having really good detailed instructions. Absolutely critical for some students. Most of them are novice users in this. I know I was, and so I had to learn. So look at it from, I know nothing. Do these instructions tell me how to use it? So trying to use that filter when we are preparing students for these assignments.
In the English classroom, we talk about how to utilize outside resources to help us with our papers. So we might use tutor.com. We might have a family member or a kind soul who says, "I will help you with your paper. Here's another resource." How can I get that student to take advantage of, oh, I forgot, there are teachers in these classes too. Take advantage of the teacher, whoever. But this is the AI resource, so it's just making students aware. I think it's always a challenge, though. How can I encourage or coerce or whatever a student to do what's good for them, which is, okay, a peer review. That's going to be so helpful. So here's something that could be helpful too. And the data shows that it is helpful. So resources.
Um, I fully agree with everything that's just been said here. When I work with other customers, I think one thing that we've ran into and we've noticed is actually the student sentiment being a barrier that you kind of have to work through. And a lot of that comes from the fact that, like, we know how AI was communicated for the last few years. And so students have their own concerns about how it may impact their own academic integrity, or they might just not know what safe usage looks like. And so spending some time doing that pre-work that Shannon was mentioning of, like, what is generative AI? How do they even produce these answers? Where is this information coming from? Why is there bias? Setting the students up with just the tools that they need to be able to effectively use it with very clear instructions can really help guide students to safely use it, and hopefully maybe to even deter them from utilizing other tools out there. Because really, students are just looking for what it means to be safe. I think they also see the value, but they're looking on to us to be telling them, what should I do and how can I utilize this in the best way possible? So really kind of holding their hand in the very beginning and showing them what that looks like in your classroom can really help with adopting, especially in the beginning. Brad, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just was thinking one thing we did early on is we created a button right next to Spark that's how to cite Spark. And they click on that button and it provides an APA citation on how to use it. And so here's a tool, and we give them, our policy, and we say, yeah, here's how you can cite this resource that you're using. And when I see those citations show up in papers and in the discussion forums, it's encouraging to see students kind of moving into and realizing, this is a tool that we're providing them, and we're going to teach them how to use it ethically and use it in a way that's, yeah. So
that's such a cool feature. I don't even think I was aware of that. That's awesome. Okay, so we have about 12 minutes left in our call. So I want to take a quick moment to see if there's anyone in the audience that has any questions for our panel. If you do, if you don't mind raising your hand, that will help me indicate. Because if not, I have a few other questions prepared.
Chloe, just to let you know, we are going to have to wrap up in about 6 minutes. Sorry about that.
No worries. That's okay. All right, then. If there are no questions, I don't see any hand raised. Steve, would you want to come off mute and share your question?
Sure. The question that I just posted in there, I was curious to know whether this tool has shown evidence that students are not using all the other tools that we don't want them to use, such as deep research or any other reasoning models that would generate content or do the synthesis and other sort of intellectual work that they ought to be doing themselves.
Can I take that one?
Mhm.
All right, so this is a very cool concept. Now, it's not 100% cut and dry, but we know that students who use Spark articulate what they learned more concretely and more succinctly than those who do not. In other words, they represent scaffolded thinking within end of course survey responses. That means free-form responses where they don't have any boundaries. They're showing that they know this content more deeply, and they've used Spark. Students who have not used Spark, so may have used Chat GPT or whatever, do not write as well as students who use Spark. So that Socratic uh, interactive method is really working well. So it's not final, but we're starting to see that because if you just copy and paste from ChatGPT, you're not learning anything. If you are asked questions and reflect with Spark and then write, you absolutely learn stuff. And it's showing in their free responses and end of course surveys through semantic and thematic analyses. Um, so it's been kind of cool. I love that question. I'll quit being a nerd. Sorry.
All right. Well, but what, just if I may follow up on that, I mean, let's assume that a student who uses, let's say, ChatGPT or any of the other similar models like that don't yet have the skills to engage with that AI entity with the Socratic skills that would elicit the type of responses that are similar to what you would get from Spark. And I'm just wondering if there's anything inherently in Spark that is so advantageous in its design and method of engagement that it's not even worth going to ChatGPT or something else because it's already predisposed to a certain form of dialogue that it doesn't there's no point in wasting your time doing it other ways. I don't know if you can
Well,
show evidence of that, but I'm curious.
yeah, for students who want to learn the topic, it's 100% better to use Spark. For students that want to not learn and just get it done and get through a class, then I don't know on that one.
Yeah, I think what makes it such Spark so much better for our students is we train it on the material it can use, and then it has boundaries on it. So it's not going to go out, it's not going to hallucinate, it's not going to, you know, it's going to keep students focused on the topic at hand because we've put boundaries on where it's drawing its training material from. And so us having more control over the training material and then the Socratic method that Spark has to engage with our students. But like George said, we can't when I see students pull in outside work, then it's clear that there's a copy paste happening. And then we have other issues that we've always had to deal with as instructors. But I think the training material that I get to bring in as the faculty member just provides a lot of quality control.
Yeah. And to piggy off of that response, I've actually heard similar student feedback from our other customers as well, is that the difference between what students like about Nectar and some of the other tools is the fact that it already knows about their learning objectives, their assignments, and they can directly ask about that information and interact their own content with it. Whereas if they were to use ChatGPT, one, they would have to pay for it. The second part is that they would have to re-upload that content every single time into a conversation just to get that tailored support. Whereas this is something that's designed by the instructor, knows everything about their course. And so that's already preset in there. And so it just kind of makes the interaction and the conversation be a little bit quicker in helping them get the content information that they need. Now, I also know that there's only 1 minute left on the clock. So I wanted to quickly wrap up this panel with just by asking our faculty panel, if you had to give one piece of advice or best practice to other educators who are implementing AI into their classroom, what would that be? And let's make it a quick tip.
If
I'd say, oh, go ahead.
if your GPT is not working, it's your prompt. It's not the tool. There, that's mine.
I would
I'd
say
say
focus on active learning. Think about ways that you can engage students in active learning and get some creative people around you to help you think about how you might design a learning resource to engage active learning.
I was going to say, think outside the box. I think beyond your normal boundaries of education and be creative. And like Brant said, bring in a team who can help you create what you're wanting your students to be doing.
And very quickly, I would echo what Mike said in the chat there. I would say model, show them what you want them to do, and lead them.
All right. Well, thank you so much